Okay.
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for attending today's ICE Public Member Networking Call. My name is Grace Calloway, and I will be serving as your technical support for today's conversation. If you have any issues, please send me a private chat and I will follow up. A few ground rules for our conversation. If it is possible, we ask for you to turn on your camera. We ask for you to mute yourself if you're not actively speaking. If you have something to say, please raise your hand and one of the moderators will call on you. Or if you're more comfortable using the chat, you are also welcome to do so. Finally, this conversation will be recorded. If you have any concerns regarding this, please feel free to send me a chat. We have an hour scheduled and will not go over that time, but if our conversation comes to a natural close before that, then we will end early. With that, I will now pass it over to our ICE Public Member Committee Chair, Becky LeBoon.
Thank you, Grace. I am, as Grace said, Becky LeBoon. I'm the public member of the National Board of Certification and Recertification for Nurse Anesthetists, and also the chair of the ICE Public Member Committee. The committee engages in activities year-round to help develop and disseminate resources for public members and for ICE member organizations, boards of who are, and any organization or individual who is interested in the phenomenon of public membership and interested in the subject matter that public members care about and that advocate for, including topics like the one that's on the agenda today. Recordings of all of these quarterly Zoom calls are posted on our public member resource page on the ICE website, which you can access by going to communities and then clicking on public members. Please visit that resource page and take advantage of the ever expanding number of links that we have to resources for public members and ICE member organizations. And please let us know if you have any interest in joining the public member committee, or if you'd like to suggest topics that we should investigate, that you recommend that we investigate and present in the future. You can contact Grace or Katie Scott at the ICE staff, or anybody on the public member committee, which you'll find listed on the website, if you to suggest things that we might become engaged in. And without taking up any more time, let me turn the meeting over to Glenna Tinney, who is a member of our committee, and she's going to moderate the program this morning. Or I guess it's not morning for all of us.
It's afternoon here, but thank you, Becky. Welcome, everyone. We're glad that you're here. So we're going to be talking about the diversity, equity, inclusion, and the addition of belonging to that framework. So I'm going to share my screen because we do have some slides that we will be sending out to you after the meeting, so they will be available. So I'm not going to be introducing each of the panel members in any kind of detail. They will introduce themselves and share with you any information that they want to share. My name is Glenna Tinney, and I am the public advisor for the National Board for Respiratory Care. And I will be moderating the panel today. I have a little bit of information to share too. So we're going to start with just talking a little bit about what is DEIB, so that we're all clear that we're on the kind of the same wavelength in terms of definitions. Then Jennifer is going to talk about why does DEIB matter, and why does it matter to all of us, no matter who we are, whoever's involved in organizations as well as board members, any stakeholders. Why does it matter to us? Then Dawn will be speaking about strategies. What can you do? So, trying to bring this down to application. So we don't want to just be talking about theory. We want application. What is it that each of us can do to make a difference in our organizations in terms of diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? And then Mark will talk about kind of what are our takeaways from this? And then we'll open for discussion. So we're really only going to be presenting for a little bit of information, and then we want to open it up. We really want this to be more interactive. We want an opportunity to hear from you in terms of your experiences with DEIB. So these are our panel members, and they, as I said, they will introduce themselves in more detail as they present. So I'm actually going to start by just giving a little overview about what we're talking about when we're talking about DEIB. And this is a nice graphic here that shows all the different components of the framework of DEI as we know it historically, and then adding belonging in the middle of this graphic, because belonging is an important component of this framework. And all of these are equally important. So thus the concentric circles. So I just want to make sure that we are thinking about the same definitions in terms of what the terminology here. So the D in DEIB is diversity. And this is really being present. So having people of all different intersections, actually, because intersectionality is important context or concept here. So people with coming from all kinds of different cultures, characteristics, all of these different things that we're listing here. And this is not an all-inclusive list, and we're not pretending that it is. But these people, it's making sure that people have a place at the table, and so they're actually present. And then equity is the process of identifying and removing barriers that create disparities and obstacles for access to resources and means and fair treatment and equal opportunities to thrive. So equity is that process. Inclusion is in creating environments in which any individual or group can be and should be feeling welcome, respected, supported, and valued to participate fully. So we have them at the table. We're removing barriers, and then we want to make sure that they feel comfortable enough that they speak up and they have an opportunity to share what they want to share, what perspectives they bring, because all people bring all kinds of different perspectives. And then the last concept here is the belonging, because this framework has been evolving over time. Belonging has been a more recent addition to this. And, you know, we all know what a sense of belonging is. We know how that feels. We know when we're in a group and we feel that we belong and that we're accepted and that we are valued and that people want to hear from us. And, you know, this makes people feel less isolated. It decreases stress. It really makes them feel like they are a part of the group. And that's what we want. So we don't just want to have people of different characteristics and groups just for the sake of having them. They're there for a reason, just like we all are, and have something to share. And the last thing I wanted to emphasize, so before we move on to talking about why this should matter to us, is that I know that most of us think that DEI is a kind of a new concept, and you know, more like in recent years, but it really isn't. It may not have been called DEI in the past, but you know, one interesting, as I was kind of researching this, one of the interesting things I found was that when you look at the history of the DEI movement, the first DEI policy actually was put into place in 1920, where Congress established the Women's Bureau of the Department of Labor. And then, of course, we had further evolution in the 60s with the civil rights movement, with the LGBTQ movement, with the women's movement. And then in 1972, we had the Equal Employment Opportunity Act. And that led to a rise of people working in DEI spaces and, you know, working in diversity. So it's important to know our history, and it's important to know that, you know, this idea of diversity, equity, inclusion, and now belonging is not so new. It is part of our culture, it's part of our country, and it continues to evolve. So now I'm going to, before I turn it over to Jennifer, I just wanted to ask, panel members, do you have anything that you wanted to add before we move on to the next section?
I'd like to add, thank you, Glenna. It's interesting to know the history and to hear the years cited where efforts were made to increase diversity and be attentive to diverse populations and inclusive of those populations in the workplace by federal mandate, federal law. And when you think of, from 1920 to today, it's 100 years. And we still have a lot of work to do. And so I just found the history to be striking, that this is not a new concept, but yet we're still facing some challenges in every aspect of employment and organizations and in life in general, where DEIB continues to be a challenge. So just was struck by the history.
Yeah,
Thank
that's a really good point, Dawn. And also, I'd like to point out that there's different ways to approach DE&I and now DE&IB, and a lot of what Glenna talked about is the regulatory approach, and that's really just the minimum that we're talking about. I mean, organizations have the flexibility and ability to go beyond what the regulatory requirements are, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that, I think, coming up. The last thing I just want to add is, another way to think about belonging is what's the feedback that you're actually getting from the folks that are, being affected by these DE&I programs and initiatives, because what you'll see, and we'll talk about in a little bit, is that, and what Glenn has mentioned already, is that although there have been substantive efforts with respect to DE&I, there's still really a lack of feeling like folks have benefited. And this is feedback that's coming directly from the people that are supposed to be the benefactors of these programs.
Thank you, Mark and Dawn. I'm going to turn it over now to Jennifer, who is going to talk to us about why does DEIB matter. And I'm just going to remind you, Jennifer, please tell people who you are and where you're from, because I didn't do that. I just used names, and I was going to leave that to each of you to introduce yourselves.
Of course. Thank you so much, Glenna. So hi, everyone. I hope you're all doing great. My name is Jennifer Cotto. I usually go by Jen. I work as a data scientist and as the co-chair of the Diversity and Inclusion Task Force at the National Registry of Emergency Medical Technicians. And I'm really excited to be here with all of you today to talk about diversity, equity, belonging. So why do we care about DEIB? There are so many reasons why we should care about this. And I'm going to start by focusing on why organizations should care. Research has shown that DEIB is essential for healthy businesses. For example, having a DEIB culture helps recruitment and retention of diverse workforce by increasing job satisfaction, commitment, engagement, and trust. And all of this helps reduce absenteeism, the number of sick days used, and turnover. And this last one is a biggie, right? Because research has shown that turnover can cost anywhere from 50 to 200% of that employee's salary. This also impacts employee morale and productivity. So you're starting to see the link between DEIB and the financial performance of the organization. Moreover, employees that feel a strong sense of belonging are employees that are more likely to stay with that employer for a longer period of time and promote that employer to others. Another reason why DEIB culture is important is because it helps foster creativity, innovation, and openness. And this helps problem solve faster and in a more robust manner. Again, seeing that link between the DEIB culture and the financial performance of the organization. Another reason why it helps is to boost the employer reputation, brand, and consumer interest. Research has shown that consumers are more likely to purchase a product if they view the organization as moral or having a purpose, which is the case for organizations with a DEIB culture. Next slide, please. Oh, awesome, thank you. So beyond the previously mentioned, there are legal reasons why organizations can benefit from promoting a DEIB culture. For example, it helps ensure everyone is treated equitably, meaning that we should be complying with the Age Discrimination and Employment Act, Americans with Disability Act, and Pregnancy Discrimination Act, just to name a few. Organizations should also ensure their websites are accessible to people with disabilities as required by the Americans with Disability Act. These can become particularly important for organizations that receive federal funding, as they are required to adhere to certain standards. I will say that meeting legal standards is important, as Mark mentioned, but it isn't enough if organizations want to obtain all the benefits that I just mentioned. And these are just a handful of benefits. There are plenty more out there. So if we want to obtain those benefits, we need to make sure that we go beyond the legal requirements and provide an environment where people feel safe, valued, heard, where they can bring their true, authentic selves to work every day. Also, it's important to note that DEIB impacts everyone, because most people want to live a very long life, right? We want to have a lot of experiences. This means that even as of today, you don't believe that DEIB impacts you currently because of your race, ethnicity, disability, sexual orientation, social economic status, education, marital status, religion, just to name a few. It will impact you because of your age, or at least you're hoping it will because you want to live a long life, right? So these are only some of the reasons why we should care about DEIB. We have included additional resources at the end of the presentation, and we will be sharing those with you, as Glenna mentioned. So you can continue to take a deeper dive into this if you're interested. So all in all, DEIB is important for organizations and everyone individually because it impacts all of us. However, it's important to note that increasing our numbers and having a diverse workforce is just one step. If we want those numbers to count, we need to create an inclusive and equitable environment where everyone feels valued, heard, safe, and a place where everyone feels like they belong. And with that, I'll open it up to Glenna, Dawn, Mark. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Yeah, thanks. I think it's, when I think of DEIB in the business context, there's the general compliance requirements that Jennifer mentioned. Then there's the, sort of the good for business, which plenty of research has showed that's what happens. But I think, what we're also talking about today with belonging is this sort of more social impact and how we want to treat people, how we want to treat each other, and how we want to live, like Jennifer mentioned. So it's the belonging is trying to bring it back to that is just really, how do we want to conduct ourselves, not just with respect to the law or with respect to the bottom line, or in our case, the social mission of the organization, but it's really how do we want to live and be a community with each other.
Thank you, Mark and Jen. We're going to move on now and Dawn is going to be talking about strategies and actions. So this is the application part that I was mentioning. So Dawn, take it over.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm so glad to see you all. I'm Dawn Morton-Rias, President and CEO of NCCPA. I have the privilege of serving in that capacity. I'm also a board certified PA, so I am an end user of the product that I help to produce. And I've practiced in family medicine and addictive medicine and care for the homeless. And so many of the strategies that I'm going to talk about are strategies that we have employed or I have employed with my staff and leadership team in many of the capacities that I've worked. I've also spent a good deal of my career in the academic world, teaching the next generation of health professionals. And so we always, sessions like this, you say, well, what can I take away? What is really something that I can do with all of this information? And so I first have to thank you all because you're taking the first important step, and that is educating yourself. And in medicine, we say you can't make the diagnosis that you don't know. And you can't affect change as it relates to DEIB without knowing what the conditions are and without educating and informing yourself. So thank you first and foremost for taking that important step. You're already down on the path to making a difference. And so what can you do as far as your organization or your workplace or even in your home and community? What can you do? I think leadership is really an important element of enacting a DEIB initiative, and that is expressing your commitment, interest and commitment in this area. For me, in this organizational capacity or in an academic setting, it's expressing your commitment to or an interest in DEIB through your vision statement, your strategic plan, your annual goals, the things that are publicly facing. We're seeing in the workplace that employees are looking to work in settings and for companies and organizations that embrace diversity of all types. And when we think of diversity and belonging and inclusion, it's not just race-based. And I know that that is what most people start to think about initially, and it evokes a lot of sentiment, emotion. And yes, race is part of it, but it's by far more involved, and it includes the intersectionality that we all experience because we're not unidimensional. We are a compilation of many, many aspects and facets that that can drive this initiative. So making a statement is really important. When employees are looking at job boards, they're looking to see, well, what is your commitment to inclusivity and diversity? So the statements that you make publicly are important. Integrating diverse representation in promotional materials is really important for two reasons. One, it sends a physical message of your interest, but it also challenges the organization, the academic setting, the workplace to live up to what they're saying. Nothing is worse. And I've had this experience where I've given a talk at a university or an organizational meeting where their promotional materials represent very diverse perspectives in age, in race, in gender, in disability, only to then present myself in front of an audience that is entirely homogeneous of a certain demographic, a certain age. So when you put the statements out and the images out, it's a call to action for that employee, employment setting, for that organization to actually live up to what you're saying that you're doing and to be held accountable to your commitment to promoting diversity and inclusion. If you have the opportunity to share your stories in newsletters, publications, articles, it's important to get those messages out. So in my role as president and CEO of NCCPA, we publish a monthly newsletter that is sent to all of the certified PAs in the United States and PA students. So we're looking at 170,000 plus people who receive our newsletter. Each and every month, we include stories about what PAs are doing across America and across the globe, and in all different types of settings, but not only what they're doing clinically, who they are and what their background is and what their special talents are, so that we're sharing and promoting externally our commitment to inclusivity and diversity. For the most part, we get lots of positive feedback. I share with you with all honesty that I also get occasional emails from somebody who says, why are you doing this? Why are you focusing on this, population? Why are you, and they express their opposition. And rather than responding viscerally, which sometimes I feel I might want to, I take that as a call to further action, as a need to help continue to educate people about the wonderful contributions that are being made in my world by PAs, but in your world by whatever profession and organization you represent. Those stories need to be told. Those messages need to be conveyed. Those individuals, groups, and communities need to be represented to the public. And so whatever platform you have through social media, newsletters, communications and other forms, make sure that those stories are told and representing the broader perspective. Also, it's important to evaluate your recruitment materials, whether you're recruiting for a board seat or recruiting for staffing, to ensure that you don't have built-in barriers to inclusivity. Are there requirements that really no longer serve the needs of the organization? Is the language inclusive? And so really taking an important and critical look at your materials to determine, well, how would this be interpreted and read by external individuals, and to assemble a group of a focus group to help review those materials is very, very helpful, because, you know, when we're looking at our own materials that we have perhaps have written ourselves, we don't see how it could be read and interpreted by others. So bringing in a team, a focus group of diverse perspectives or individuals that represent diverse perspectives to take a look at your recruitment materials would be very helpful in ensuring that you're being as open and as broad-minded as possible in all of your publications and externally facing initiatives. I'll take the next slide, please. I know the font is a little small here, and I apologize for that. But when we think about what are some of the things that you can do internally within your organization, within your workplace, within your setting, first and foremost, if you're committed to ensuring that you have diverse representation and diverse perspectives, creating a culture that is safe and welcoming, that fosters belonging, there need to be resources applied to it. This cannot be an unfunded mandate where we just by magic expect that this education is going to happen, that these initiatives are going to take place. So it needs to be included in your line item budgeting, allocating some dollars for educating of staff or educating the board or educating yourself to increase your awareness of the concerns and development of strategies. Again, evaluate your staffing and your recruitment strategies through a DEIB lens, as I've mentioned previously. Are your organization's operational procedures and policies reflective of the broadest perspective, or are those operational policies and procedures very limiting? And again, that's where focus groups help in evaluating that information. For example, in our case, we're taking a critical look because we are a certifying body. We're taking a critical look not only at our operational policies and procedures and our recruitment materials, but our test item banks to see are our exam items, because we develop exams, are our exam items sending subliminal messages? Are we fostering stereotypes or stereotypical thinking in some of our vignettes? And so this is a huge undertaking that will require a lot of effort, and it's not going to be inexpensive. It's not going to be cheap. It's not going to be free. We have to put our money behind our initiatives and our interests. And that's just one example of something that we need to do and are doing in our world to put energy behind our efforts to ensure that we are actually walking the walk that we are talking about and not just paying lip service. It's also important to look at your HR activities and to see, are there educational endeavors that can be provided for your board or for your staff, and to make those HR driven elevates the receptivity or elevates the requirement. In my case, it is important for our staff, of which is now a very diverse staff, to continue to receive structured education and information on the importance of DEIB, strategies that we can employ to increase our cultural sensitivity, our awareness, our recognition of implicit bias. And so to have those training experiences available for staff, or in the case of boards, as part of your board development, is really very important. It's also important to employ others and bring in opinions and references and resources to help inform the thinking. For example, another way that we have done it is to create a book club where members of the staff or members of the board can introduce potential books that we could read as individuals and then discuss to help increase our awareness. This is an ongoing process. This is not a one and done. This is not something that you can just do, oh, check the box, now we're good. I've spent my entire career teaching and learning in this space, and I continue to learn in this space. The most dangerous thing that I think anyone could assume is that they are done. Oh, I've had this training, I'm good, check the box and move on, because we live in such a diverse population and society with so many emerging issues, it is really important for us to continue to enhance our knowledge and skills. But back to what we can do internally, it's important to check in with the staff or check in with the board or check in with your end users to see how are we doing. That is, take in the feedback. What are we doing well? What of our activities that we've organized are resonating well? Do you feel the sense of belonging? Conduct surveys, satisfaction surveys, have focus group meetings, because you want to know, is this effort working? Are people still feeling that they are connected, or do they feel that they don't really feel welcomed and that they belong? So soliciting input from the end users, from the people you're hoping to reach, is really very important. I would love to say that it's always going to work out beautifully, that the monthly celebrations that you put on your calendar, recognizing diverse perspectives and diverse holidays, are always going to be well received. But of course, they're not always going to be well received. There may be a month where you forget and you miss an important holiday, or you fail to recognize a celebration of significance that is represented in your staff. Own that oversight, accept responsibility for that misstep, apologize, and move forward. So making sure that we are doing everything that we can and knowing that we're never going to be perfect and that that's okay. Soliciting input and feedback from others is certainly very important. These are just some of the strategies that we have employed even within my board, as well as within our organization, to increase awareness and to increase knowledge and skills for our staff, and to make this a well-received organization and a place where people want to come to work because they feel that they are connected and that they have a home and that their perspectives matter. So I think that's all that I'd like to share right now, but I'd like to open it to my colleagues to see if they have some additional internally facing strategies or externally facing strategies that I may have missed.
I would just like to emphasize, kind of reinforcing what Don was just saying on the last bullet. It is important for us to learn from when we make mistakes. And this bullet says from missteps when they occur, not if they occur, because we know they are going to occur. We're not going to be perfect in this. We are all learning. We are all evolving in this arena. So we just know that it's going to happen, and we need to learn from it and apologize and move on. Mark, I think you came off mute, so you must want to add something.
Yeah, I just want to acknowledge two things. So one, what an impressive effort is going on at NCCPA related to this issue. And then two, how daunting potentially all of this looks for folks that aren't doing DEI or DEIB. So, just keep in mind that we know nonprofits, your public members serving on nonprofit boards. Nonprofits generally don't like to jump into the deep end right away on things, go very slow with respect to most matters. So it's okay to just pick one or two of these things to focus on. And this, of course, we want everybody to get to something like this at some point, but this certainly isn't, and Don, jump in here if I'm misrepresenting anything, but this certainly isn't something that all of these things aren't things that we're looking for folks to do right away.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really believe in the do what you can, start where you are, use what you have concept. What I've shared with you is the result of, at least in my experience, 9 years of work with NCCPA. This is not something that we have just flipped a switch and all of a sudden now we're able to do all of these things. Very slow and evolutionary in its process. And so start where you are, simply begin with putting it on record that this is something that you're interested in. Just that action, first and foremost, I think is really very helpful. But I don't want to take up any more time.
So now we are going to move on to Mark. He's going to talk to us, just about some takeaways that are really kind of based in reality, which is, I think, what he was just trying to emphasize in his comments before. So Mark, go ahead.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. So just quick introduction. My name is Mark Franco. I'm the chair of ICE's current DE&I committee. By trade, I'm an attorney. I provide general counsel services to all types of organizations, including nonprofit credentialing organizations, but have been really involved with some of the DE&I work that ICE has been doing over the last 3 years. So I'm just going to keep this brief, but you know, as a public member, your role is sort of defined by the standards. Specifically under Standard 2, it says a public member's role is to bring a perspective to the decision-making of the certification program that is broader than the certificant perspective, and to help balance the certification program's role in protecting the public while advancing the interests of the certificant. So, you know, these aren't in any particular order, but it's really with that specific role in mind. And also, you know, just generally knowing that you're public members and, you know, you may have limited terms, just knowing sort of what's the practical impact, like Glenna mentioned, what's the practical impact that you can have on, you know, with respect to the particular program you're serving. So I'm just going to start with the last bullet. It's, you know, I think one of the best first steps is just start talking, right? That's something that even to everyone in my general, you know, professional network, when they start thinking about, you know, a particular issue or concern, I say, don't just talk to me, right? Talk to as many people as you can about this, because that's a really good way to get more informed. So start talking to other folks about this particular issue, DEIB. Use your role as a public member to explore how the organization might be impacted by these types of programs. And then again, you're serving the interests of the public. So I think it's an opportunity for you to encourage the organization, if it hasn't been talking about these concerns, to really start talking about them. And that, you know, that's really potentially the best first step, is starting to have the conversation. So I'll stop there.
Do we have any comments from the panel before we open up for discussion to the entire group? So before we move on, I'm gonna stop sharing in just a minute, but this is, we've included in the slides that you will be receiving from Grace our contact information for each of the panel members. And then just a list of resources. It's not an all-inclusive list, but it has some information from ICE, from the DEI committee. There's a resource guide. There's a book on here. There's various, these are articles around diversity, equity, and inclusion that also expand to include belonging. So just know that you're going to be getting that. So now we would like to hear from you. You've heard from us. Now we want to hear from you in terms of any kind of questions, comments, any experiences you've had, anything you want to share from kind of where you sit and your perspective. So you can just come off of mute, and it'd be helpful actually if you raised your hand. So if you go down at the bottom under reactions, there's a place where you can raise your hand. So we'll start with you, Beverly.
I was just going to add on to what both Dawn and Mark alluded to in talking to your networks. I would also suggest talking to your staff and your board members. I happen to be very privileged to serve on the board of directors, where Dawn is our CEO. But both staff and board, and I will say the board has been very lucky to have such an involved staff. We've sort of adapted some of what they've done, but that has sort of created a great movement forward for us. So don't forget the people that are part of the organization that you serve with.
Thank you, Beverly. Tom?
Yeah, thanks. It's all very interesting, and we're on this journey too. I don't think we have as much experience as Dawn has. We've started by looking inward and trying to address the diversity issue. We think there's a direct link to diversity and health outcomes that we are trying to improve, and that's diversity in itself is a value that we need to work on. So we're trying to figure out if there's anything in our own systems that is either biased or inequitable. Those aren't necessarily the same. I'm interested though in specifically the issue of, and I'm really looking forward to getting the resource document that you flashed provocatively on the screen. I had just recently read a book about this, which I thought was really useful, but I'll see if it's on there, and if it's not, I'll share it with everybody. I'm interested in the issue of surveys and how to really excavate the feelings of people. And I'm not interested in surveys per se, but I'm interested in this problem of culture change, because we all know the kind of culture we work in. Culture change is hard. And I think surveys, focus groups, or other kinds of data can be helpful. And I just wonder what kind of experience other people have around the kind of data you can collect, but also around strategies for changing culture. So that's kind of I'm interested in it from a perspective of my own organization, but actually I'm interested in it more broadly around healthcare, because the healthcare culture of physicians are very aware that the culture that we create in healthcare is often as racist and inequitable as the society we live in, and it's not a value that people. Not to say that I think people believe that the values that we have in healthcare that drive clinicians are very positive, but that often we work against ourselves because we share a lot of the inequities in broader society, and also because the hierarchies in medicine also drive inequities in the way we behave, across the teams. So this general problem of changing culture and the role of surveys and data in doing that is the sort of larger question that I have. If everybody has any experience to share, I'm really interested in hearing about it.
Well, that's just a little minor question there. How do you facilitate culture change? Does anybody have an answer to that? Please raise your hands so we can get an answer to that. But Jennifer, I know you are a data scientist, and Dawn, you were speaking about surveys, and of course we're interested in hearing from anybody else as well. Did you want to say anything further about what Thomas is asking about using those kind of mechanisms for culture change, the surveys and focus groups and those kind of things? Jennifer, you want to?
So we are also just starting. So we're 3 years into having our diversity and inclusion task force. So it is, as it has been mentioned before, it is a slow and steady progress, but as long as it's steady, that's the importance, right? Even slow, it's still progress. We did start having an annual survey just to gather feedback from all staff members and see where we are. So first year was just kind of baseline, seeing what we're doing well, seeing what we can do better. And then as the years have progressed, we've modified, added some questions, trying to tailor based on where we are as an organization in our efforts, and making sure, and I think this is the most critical piece to it, is making sure that you have action items to respond to that feedback, right? So if they are highlighting some areas of opportunity, just be open and honest with your staff and be like, hey, this is what we've heard that we're doing well. These are some of our areas of opportunity, and just make sure that you have initiatives to address these areas of opportunity and remind folks, hey, for example, we have contagious conversations, right? Where it's a safe space for people to come in and talk about diverse topics on DEIB. It's like, hey, we've heard your feedback that we don't have enough spaces to talk about this. This is one of the initiatives that we're putting forward, and continue asking feedback based on those initiatives on an annual basis. That's how we've been able to leverage the survey and the data part to kind of improve and set up initiatives as well. We've also used it we have annual trainings which are required. We have a number of different events throughout the year, but we have one annual required training for all staff. And the topic for that usually comes from feedback that we've received from folks from those surveys, right? So again, making sure that you're linking everything together. Anyone else, please let me know if I missed any component of your question.
Yeah, go ahead, Glenna.
Oh.
Well, I was just going to say one of the resources we suggested is this book called Diversity Inc., which and they've compiled a bunch of research data and presented it. And one of the things that they are suggesting, which Jennifer has firsthand experience with, is this idea of a task force. And that's also something that we're considering as part of the our toolkit that the ICE-DEI committee is creating is this idea of a task force. The thing that you'll want to remember though is and what Diversity Inc. talks about is to make sure that the folks on that task force represent all levels of the organization, because oftentimes you'll see DE&I often only worked at the board level, or only worked at by volunteers, or only worked at by internal staff, and then the ideas get presented to other groups, and then you start, that's when you can get confusion, or you can get misunderstanding, or you can get pushback. So it's it seems to be that there's a case for making sure that that initial group that tackles it within your organization has the proper representation from everybody that's going to be involved.
Thank you, Mark. We're going to move on now. Becky, I think you were next.
Thank you, Glenna. I'd be interested to know what organizations are doing, if anything, to increase diversity within the professional talent pool, the applicant pool.
If I may get started, I could just simply share one thing that we've done, NCCPA. So we're part of a coalition of 4 organizations, national organizations that represent the PA profession. There's the Education Association, which is the analog to AAMC. There's the membership organization, which is an analog to AMA. And there's the accrediting body. And then we as the certifying body. The staff put together a proposal and presented it to the board of directors to fund a convening, a bringing together of representatives from the entire profession. Because we as the certifying body, we have nothing to do with who gets into PA school. And we certify them. One of the things that we looked at was, is the certification process a barrier? And if you get out of PA school, you're pretty good, and you're going to 99% chance, 98% chance you're going to be certified. But so we assembled this group. The board approved the funding to establish a convening, and we called it the Represent Summit, where we invited 100 people representing the profession. We funded students to attend. And it was a structured day-and-a-half event to just talk about this problem, this issue of lack of diversity, racial and ethnic diversity in the PA profession. Now, there are other concerns, but we tackled this one first. And so we started to develop some strategies and a commitment across the profession to identify goals for each of the organizations and some of the individual champions, and to have a structured process by which we check in annually to see if we've made progress. Now, will this be a quick fix? Of course not. But it sends the message to the profession and to the pre-PA students, those who are thinking about the profession, that we're not living with our head in the sand. We know that there is a lack of diversity, and it takes all of us as the 4 national organizations, in my case, to be rowing in a similar direction, maybe not all doing the same things, but doing what we can within our sphere to increase, one, awareness about this profession, two, to provide support to those who are trying to pursue medicine and health field and other health professions in their preparation. So that means reaching out to undergraduate institutions. That's the educational organization, not the certifying body. But what we did was bring those people together to create an accountability, a document of accountability to help hold us all to a high standard of movement and recognition of the importance of this initiative and these initiatives that each organization can undertake individually, and to identify things that we can do collaboratively. And so this is what we've done. But this is going to be a long process. This is nowhere near quick fix. This is simply heightening awareness and letting the profession and the new graduates and the students know that we are mindful of the importance and the connection between lack of diversity and increased health disparities, et cetera, and that we are interested in making movement or making a change going forward.
Thank you, Dawn. I think you were next, Catherine.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Really good conversation today. I wanted to build on something that Tom said about surveying, and I think surveys are really good for tracking trends and kind of movements, moving the needle. But I think that actions are what are going to take, have an impact. And several of you have mentioned already things like just start with talking with people. I just want to call out increasing amount of research out there showing that one-on-one, face-to-face conversations, whether it's canvassing or otherwise, can actually shift views, and that those views can remain shifted. So that's very exciting, I think. And I think it's a place where we can all take that action, talking one-on-one, face-to-face. Of course, then you have to have the multiplier effect of more people that we talk to, and talking to more and more people. But I just wanted to call out that is an increasing body of research where that action of talking to people can shift views, can change behavior, and can have an impact. And then using the survey data to track those trends. So thank you. And if anyone has any comments on any of that data, or if there's any way that we can continue to build on that, I'd be curious. But I just want to call that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. Nicole.
Hi, I'm actually going to take this a little bit backwards and ask a really maybe lame question, but how do you suggest dealing with, and I'm thinking of two particular populations. The first is, let's politely use the term regressive, those who basically don't believe that diversity has value, and more importantly, don't believe that education has value. Going back to, I think Dawn had said sometimes, when she sees the challenges to some of her actions, she recognizes that as a way to, okay, we need to bring up education. But if you're dealing with, and I'm just going to politely use Florida legislation, people who literally don't value, where do you start that conversation? And then the second is, how do you bring those people that are in complacency, who think everything's just great as it is? So I guess I'm taking us a few steps backwards into, how do you get people to actually appreciate what we're talking about?
I can tackle a little, just a part of that. So, you're never going to be able to convince everybody, right? But where you can have an impact as a public member is the governing body of the organization, and we all know that the duty of each director is to act in the best interest of their organization. So the more that we can frame doing these things, making the business case scenarios, showing the research related to, the benefits of diversity, showing the interest potentially at the community and professional level, making those arguments to the board, then the board can take action related to that. And, it may not necessarily meet what some naysayers in the profession want, but at least the board has recognized that this is something that's good for the organization.
I would add to that, just finding allies, as Mark previously organization. If you have some folks in the leadership on board, that'll be really beneficial to help promote the initiatives. I agree, you won't be able to get everyone on board. It would be ideal, but that would be really difficult. But setting up the stage and letting everyone know that this is the culture that you want to set forward for the organization, that these are our values and we're going to live them, right? It's going to decrease the opportunities for them to openly speak up as you continue to build that culture more strongly, because they're going to be the minority then, right? You don't feel comfortable speaking against folks. So that might not happen as often. You're still going to have it, but it might not happen as often. One of the other things that we've done is provide events and initiatives that are open to everyone. So of course, what that entails is that most folks that already have buy-in are the ones that are participating. And then we at least have one training a year that requires everyone to attend, independent if they are on board or not, because we understand that it's valuable for the organization. And again, it adheres to our values and where we stand. So there's a way to keep, get some folks to participate and still learn. And sometimes just by getting that different perspective and learning from other folks external to the organization as to the benefit of DEIB can help alleviate some of that resistance.
So we only have about 4 minutes left. I see we still have a couple of questions. So I think Nancy, you were next.
Yes. I was listening to you all that have hundreds and thousands of test takers and all that. What if you test 500 people every 2 years and your research is small? Are there places where people can go and get funding for some of these activities?
Yeah, that's a good question, Nancy, and that could be something that I bring back to the ICE-DEI committee as a concern. I'm not familiar with any places right now that are specifically funding these types of efforts, but that could be something that we look at as part of the committee's work to help the smaller certification program.
And we have time for one more. Zeno, you're last.
Okay, thank you, Glenna. Great panel, and thanks to each of you for your presentations. I just wanted to echo the sentiment that was made earlier, I think by Tom, about the need to make cultural changes in an organization in order for this to stick. And we all know that that's so very hard to do. But from the board to the leadership in the organization right on down, we've got to be able to move beyond what I call the feel good of talking the talk and actually walk the walk. And it doesn't matter what policies are in place if the leadership of the organization, again, from the board right on down, is not committed to it. It makes it so very hard to try to institute systemic changes that will become institutionalized. You don't want this to be today's buzzwords of something that is taking place. You want to get a cultural change that has DEI, DEIB institutionalized so that it remains long beyond the individuals who are helping to put these policies, this culture in place. And any suggestions, recommendations, experiences that folks can share for how this is done over the long term to make sure that it becomes, and I think that word is so very key, institutionalized, would certainly be helpful to make this a successful effort.
So I think thank you for that, Zeno. I think that this is kind of an ongoing conversation, talking about cultural change and how we can engage in activities that help to move us in that direction. I think, the actions that Dawn was presenting, some of the strategies get at some of that. but we certainly are not going to answer that question at the moment because we are now at 2 o'clock and we don't have time to really explore that further, but perhaps we can have another call at some point in the future to continue this conversation, bringing it more down into application and, more just having discussions. So anyway, we are at time, and I do want to thank the panel members. Thank you, Jennifer and Dawn and Mark. Thank you. We appreciate your input, and thank you all of you for your participation and engagement in this topic. It is an important topic for all of us, and we are all still evolving, and we are all still learning about how to do this. And I think Tom made comments about it's kind of like a minefield. And there's a lot of potential for upset and like Nicole was saying, kind of resistance. So there's a lot to think about as we are moving forward with this. So again, thank you, everybody. And Grace will be sending out the slides. So, my provocation with the resources, you'll actually have it in hand and you'll be able to see them. So I think with that, we're going to end now. Thank you all again. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Take care, everyone. Thanks.